You ever notice how some women, even after they hurt a good man, suddenly start behaving in ways that seem almost anxious, almost fearful? They act differently around the men they wronged. And it's not just guilt, it's something far deeper, far more revealing about what they truly fear. Most men never catch it because they're too busy replaying their own pain, too busy questioning their worth. But the truth is, a woman's fear after hurting a genuinely good man exposes the fragile, raw core of her psyche, the part she never wants anyone to see. The first thing women fear is losing control. It's not about domination or power in the traditional sense. It's about the illusion of stability she's built in her own mind. When a woman hurts a man who's loyal, patient, and emotionally invested, she's confronted with an undeniable reflection of her own choices. A good man mirrors integrity, consistency, and values that she might have disregarded. That mirror is terrifying because it forces her to reckon with the reality that she cannot manipulate or charm her way out of the consequences. This time, he's not chasing her to fix her mistakes. He's not bending over backward to maintain a connection that she's fractured. And that lack of control, the inability to influence a man's emotional response, unsettles her more than any argument, any fight, or any fleeting guilt ever could. This fear manifests subtly at first. Maybe she overcompensates with fake kindness, sending messages with an almost robotic warmth, trying to test if you're still emotionally available. Or maybe she withdraws entirely, letting silence become a weapon, hoping that absence will make you come back crawling. In both cases, it's not about what she wants. It's about what she fears losing, the narrative she's built around herself. The good man sees through it, and that transparency terrifies her because it exposes her vulnerability. And vulnerability is weakness in a mind conditioned to avoid consequences. The second fear is exposure. Hurting a good man often means she's aware of what she has done and knows deep down that her actions contradict her self-image. There's a part of her mind that whispers, "I am not the person I want them to think I am." And when she encounters a man who genuinely embodies patience and integrity, that whisper turns into a scream. Exposure can take many forms: someone else finding out, a friend revealing the truth, or most agonizing of all, the man himself finally standing firm and reflecting back the disappointment she has caused. Her fear of exposure isn't just fear of shame. It's fear of judgment from someone whose opinion actually matters, someone she can't charm, manipulate, or gaslight. And then there's the third fear: regret. This isn't fleeting regret over a momentary mistake. It's the kind that creeps into her bones when she realizes she has permanently fractured something rare, something honest, something pure. A good man doesn't just walk away. He holds his dignity while maintaining boundaries, and watching him maintain that dignity, knowing it could have been hers to cherish, triggers a profound fear. The fear that she may have lost something she'll never find again. This fear gnaws at her even when she pretends it doesn't exist. Even in her bravest, most aloof moments, it lingers in the background, shaping her actions in ways most men never notice. But a good man always feels it. And here's the cruel irony: these fears don't always bring her back to you. Sometimes they manifest as avoidance, as subtle manipulation, as silent anxiety that keeps her awake at night. But understanding them, truly seeing them, gives you the power to step into a different realm of awareness. You realize her reactions aren't random. They're patterns born of fear, guilt, and regret. And the moment you see the psychology behind her behavior, the moment you understand her deepest insecurities, is the moment you reclaim your own power, your clarity, your peace. Once you recognize the fears she carries after hurting a good man, you start to notice the patterns, the subtle ways they surface in her behavior. This is where most men get trapped, reacting to the chaos she projects, rather than understanding the fear underneath. Women who have wounded a good man operate on three psychological layers at once: anxiety, self-protection, and instinctive testing. And if you don't understand these layers, you'll end up replaying the same heartbreak over and over, never fully reclaiming your power. Let's start with anxiety. Fear breeds tension in ways that aren't always visible, but they ripple through her actions like invisible currents. She might overanalyze every word you say, reread messages multiple times, or misinterpret your tone intentionally. These are not signs of genuine concern. They're markers of internal chaos. She's scared that the good man she hurt will finally see the full truth of her choices, the things she tried to mask with charm or distraction. That anxiety drives erratic behavior, sudden warmth, abrupt coldness, or even subtle tests to see if your loyalty has limits. A man who doesn't understand this will feel like he's navigating a minefield. But once you grasp the psychology, you can see that these behaviors are less about you and more about her fear of facing the consequences she set in motion. Then comes self-P protection. Women instinctively shield themselves from judgment and exposure, and after hurting a good man, that instinct goes into overdrive. She might start distancing herself emotionally, creating a wall between her actions and your reactions. You could see her cancel plans, become overly guarded with her words, or appear detached. What's critical to understand here is that this wall is rarely about losing interest in you. It's about fear of vulnerability. The moment she admits guilt or allows regret to fully surface, she risks losing her self-image, and that scares her more than any confrontation. A good man senses this wall and doesn't crumble. Instead, he respects it, understanding that forcing her to confront it before she's ready only strengthens her defenses. And then there's instinctive testing, the most subtle and psychologically fascinating layer. When a woman has hurt a man she recognizes as rare and valuable, she instinctively measures his boundaries, his patience, his emotional resilience. These tests aren't always conscious. They often manifest as small provocations, ambiguous comments, or moments of withdrawal. She wants to know, will he stay? Will he forgive? Will he diminish himself to accommodate her chaos? Each response from you confirms or denies her worst fears, and a man unaware of this dynamic can get trapped into over-explaining, apologizing, or trying to win her back emotionally. But the truly powerful move is observation. Watch her tests without judgment, without anxiety, without overreaction. See them for what they are: fear disguised as behavior, not desire disguised as manipulation. Here's the harsh truth most men never grasp. The moment you understand her fears and why she tests you, the power shifts entirely. You no longer chase illusions or replay pain. You stand in clarity, watching her actions through the lens of psychology rather than emotion. That clarity alone transforms the dynamic. A woman who hurt a good man will always wrestle with control, exposure, and regret. But a man who sees the undercurrent isn't a victim. He's aware. He holds his boundaries without anger, without resentment, and without self-doubt. And in that awareness, she begins to feel what she's been avoiding all along: the weight of her actions reflected in the eyes of someone who doesn't need to tolerate them. The men who fall into despair, who replay the past and plead for reconciliation, never reach this level of clarity. The men who rise above, who observe and internalize the psychological truth, reclaim their dignity and peace. And that is the real lesson. It's never about punishing her, controlling her, or winning her back. It's about understanding her fears deeply enough to never be trapped by them again. Now that you understand the fears she carries and how they manifest, the next layer is the response. How a good man reacts when confronted with a woman's post-hurt anxiety, her self-P protection, and her instinctive tests. This is where most men fail. They get caught up in their own emotions, anger, confusion, heartbreak, and they react impulsively. They argue, chase, beg, or withdraw in ways that feed her fears and reinforce the cycle. But the truly rare men, those who recognize the psychology at play, respond differently. They respond with awareness, boundaries, and quiet strength. First, recognize that emotional overreaction plays directly into her fears. When she sees a man lose control, doubt himself, or plead for forgiveness, it validates her belief that she can manipulate or influence the narrative. She fears exposure and regret. Yes, but she also fears losing power. A man who reacts impulsively gives her back the illusion of control. The rare man, however, remains steady. He acknowledges his feelings internally, but does not project them outward in ways that feed her insecurities. This doesn't make him cold. It makes him grounded. Emotional control is not suppression, it's mastery. He feels the betrayal, the disappointment, and the hurt, but he does not hand over his power by overreacting. Second, set boundaries without guilt. A woman who has hurt a good man often tests where the line exists between tolerance and consequence. She wants to see if she can provoke him into lowering his standards, into compromising his dignity to accommodate her. Boundaries are not threats. They are statements of self-respect. Saying no, walking away from manipulation, and refusing to tolerate repeated disrespect are not punishments. They are confirmations of your worth. And when a good man does this, she feels that fear again, the one rooted in exposure and regret. She realizes that her actions have consequences that cannot be bypassed by charm or gaslighting. Next, embrace observation without attachment. This is subtle but deadly effective. Watch her tests, her anxious behavior, her defensive walls. Do not react emotionally. Observe and understand them for what they are. Fear-driven patterns, not expressions of desire or love. Most men try to interpret every behavior as a reflection of her feelings for them. That is a trap. Her actions after hurting a good man are rarely about love. They are about fear. Recognizing this difference gives a man clarity that is rare and magnetic. It allows him to navigate her behavior without losing himself. Then maintain your self-value in silence. Silence is a powerful tool, more psychologically impactful than any argument, confrontation, or declaration of hurt. When a man maintains his dignity, continues his personal growth, and refrains from reacting to provocation, he communicates a truth no words can. He is not available for manipulation. He is aware of her fears, and he will not compromise his integrity. That realization unsettles her, not because she is malicious, but because it confronts her with a reality she has avoided, the permanence of consequences, when a good man refuses to bend. Finally, understand that your response does not seek revenge or closure. It seeks clarity and peace. The rare man is not driven by bitterness, but by self-respect and psychological insight. He sees her fears, recognizes the patterns, and chooses his response carefully, never letting her chaos dictate his state of mind. In doing this, he breaks the cycle. He protects himself while remaining emotionally intelligent. And in that space of calm, grounded awareness, he becomes untouchable in a way most men cannot comprehend. A man who is no longer a victim of her fears, but a master of his own emotional reality. After a woman hurts a good man, the aftermath isn't just immediate. It stretches quietly, insidiously into every interaction that follows. The thing most men never see is that her fears don't vanish. They transform. Anxiety becomes hypervigilance. Self-protection becomes guardedness. Walls built higher than ever. Testing becomes a subtle, ongoing calibration of your boundaries. And if a man doesn't recognize this, doesn't understand how to navigate it, he can be trapped again, even years later, replaying pain that could have been left behind. The first psychological residue is defensiveness. She becomes acutely aware of the power dynamics in every encounter, often unconsciously. Every word you say, every look, every action is filtered through a lens of self-preservation. She fears exposure and regret, so she tests constantly, probing for weakness, for signs that she can reclaim the narrative. Many men misinterpret this as disinterest, jealousy, or manipulation. Rarely is it simple. It's her mind attempting to anticipate consequences she still hasn't reconciled with. A good man sees the pattern, not the chaos, and understands that her behavior is fear-driven, not intentional sabotage. Then comes inconsistency, the hallmark of a woman wrestling with her own regret. She might oscillate between warmth and coldness, affection and distance, clarity and ambiguity. This inconsistency is terrifying for most men because it challenges their trust, their patience, their understanding of reality. But a man who understands female psychology sees this as a reflection of her inner struggle, not a judgment on him. Every moment of inconsistency is a glimpse into her unresolved fear, a shadow of the regret she carries over having hurt someone rare and loyal. Recognizing this truth allows a man to maintain calm, to avoid the trap of reacting emotionally to every fluctuation. Another long-term effect is projection. Women often project their fear, guilt, and regret onto the very person they hurt. She may accuse you of distrust, of being distant, or of not caring enough, even when you are doing everything right. Her fears whisper, "He will abandon me," or "He will see through me." And she projects these scenarios as if they are reality. A good man recognizes this instantly. Projection is not truth. It's a defense mechanism, a way to externalize guilt without confronting it internally. Seeing through projection means you no longer internalize her fears as your own. They are hers, not yours. Then there's the subtle shift in value perception. She begins to unconsciously measure herself against the good man she hurt, aware that she may never encounter his level of integrity, loyalty, or emotional intelligence again. Some women respond by withdrawing, some by testing, others by attempting reconciliation, but all are shaped by fear. The rare man understands that her value perception influenced by regret and fear doesn't dictate his own worth. He remains grounded in self-respect, aware that her attempts, whether conscious or unconscious, cannot alter the reality that he is rare, steady, and unshaken. Finally, the lesson is clear. Understanding these long-term effects transforms the dynamic entirely. You are no longer a man reacting to chaos. You are a man observing patterns, seeing motives, and responding with clarity and boundaries. You protect yourself emotionally, maintain dignity, and navigate her fear-driven behavior without losing your equilibrium. A woman may fear control, exposure, and regret, and these fears can linger for years. But a man who understands this, who maintains self-value and psychological insight, cannot be trapped by them again. He becomes untouchable, not through force, but through awareness, strength, and emotional mastery. The ultimate antidote to the chaos she carries. By now you understand the fears she carries, the ways they manifest, and the subtle patterns that shape her behavior after hurting a good man. But the ultimate lesson is not just recognizing these dynamics. It's learning how to rise above them, how to reclaim your power, and how to live without allowing her fear-driven behavior to dictate your emotional reality. The rare man doesn't dwell on betrayal. He internalizes the lesson, sees the psychology, and uses it to sharpen his emotional intelligence. That is the true transformation. First, embrace self-respect as your shield. A woman's fears are potent, but they only control you if you allow them to. Maintaining boundaries isn't coldness, it's clarity. Saying no when you need to, walking away when her patterns threaten your peace, and refusing to compromise your dignity communicates far more than arguments or lectures ever could. A good man understands that emotional energy is finite. He spends it on growth, on building his life, and on interacting with those who meet him at his level of integrity. He doesn't chase approval from someone whose fears make her unpredictable. Second, cultivate patience and observation. The temptation to react impulsively, to punish, to demand explanation, or to chase after a fractured connection is the trap most men fall into. But the rare man sees the hidden motivations behind her behavior. He recognizes that her anxiety, her walls, and her subtle tests are fear-driven, not desire-driven. Patience allows him to respond rather than react. Observation allows him to learn without attachment. And together, patience and observation turn every interaction into insight, a mirror into her psychology rather than a battlefield for his emotions. Next, turn clarity into power. Understanding female psychology, especially after betrayal, is not a weapon to manipulate. It is a compass to guide your life. You see her fears for what they are: control, exposure, regret. You see her patterns, her tests, her defenses, and instead of being ensnared by them, you maintain your equilibrium, your emotional standards, and your dignity. That clarity is magnetic. A woman who has hurt a good man may fear losing control over him, but a man who refuses to be swayed by fear, guilt, or projection is untouchable. His value is unshakable because it is grounded in self-awareness, not external validation. Finally, internalize the ultimate lesson. Your power is your peace. You cannot control her, change her, or erase her fear, but you can control your reaction. You can choose awareness over confusion, boundaries over compromise, and emotional intelligence over impulsive reaction. The rare man transforms chaos into insight, betrayal into clarity, and fear-driven behavior into a masterclass in psychological observation. And in doing so, he becomes untouchable, not through force, manipulation, or domination, but through self-respect, awareness, and integrity. Now, here's something for you to reflect on. Imagine the three fears we discussed: control, exposure, and regret as numbers. If her fear of control is 7, exposure is 5, and regret is 8, what is the sum of all three? Write your answer in the comments below. Reflect on it. Think about how each fear manifests in real life and understand how knowing this changes your perspective on relationships. If you learned something powerful today, like the video, subscribe for more insights, and share it with a friend who needs to hear the truth. Your awareness is your power. All.